Martha Gable felt the soul of her diner in the soles of her shoes. It was in the gentle dip of the linoleum by the coffee station, a valley worn smooth by 21 years of her own pacing. It was in the permanent scent of bacon grease and burnt sugar. The Crossroads. Diner, just off Route 54 outside of Jefferson City, Missouri, wasn't a business. It was a ledger of her life. And now a man in an expensive suit wanted to erase it. The letter sat on the stainless steel prep counter, its ivory paper a stark intruder. Ethel Red Development Group. The name sounded like a greedy king. The language was just as feudal. It spoke of urban renewal, a generous final offer, and a legal cudgel called eminent domain for private development. They wanted her land to build luxury condos. Her view was of the interstate and a field of Missouri soybeans, and she wouldn't have traded it. She'd inherited the diner from her husband Frank after he'd lost his fight with the cancer that came home with him from the Gulf. Keeping it running was a silent, daily promise to a man she still missed like a phantom limb. The letter said they had the city council's approval. It said her property was the last holdout. It said her compliance was a foregone conclusion. Martha folded the letter, the sharp crease a small, unsatisfying act of defiance, and tucked it into her apron pocket. It felt cold against her hip. That crisp paper was a world away from the one she taped to the front door every November. That one was just printer paper, the words in thick black Sharpie. Veterans Day. To all who served, and to our brothers and sisters on 2 wheels. Your meal and coffee are on the house today. Thank you. Frank had started the tradition. He'd been a Marine who understood how a man could feel invisible after taking off a uniform. He also had a soft spot for the bikers who rumbled through, seeing in their vests and codes a different kind of core. When Frank was gone, Martha kept the promise. She remembered one year in particular, maybe a dozen years back. A bitter, gray November day. The diner was quiet when the bell over the door jingled and a kid walked in. He couldn't have been more than 22, but his eyes were ancient. He wore a patched-up leather jacket over a faded army sweatshirt and moved like he was trying not to take up space. He sat at the far end of the counter. "Coffee?" she asked, pot in hand. He just nodded. She filled his mug. "Menu, hon." He shook his head. "Just a burger, maybe." She saw his eyes flicker to the sign on the door, then quickly away, as if afraid of being caught wanting something. She knew that look. "Cheeseburger, fries, and a slice of apple pie coming right up," she said, not asking. "Frank's favorite." She made the burger herself, not skimping on the cheese or bacon. She kept his coffee mug full. He ate in methodical silence. When he was done, he stood and walked to the door. "Thank you, ma'am," he mumbled to the floor. "You get somewhere warm," she said. Later, she found a neatly folded $5 bill tucked under the plate. It was probably the last he had. She smoothed it out and put it in the donation jar for the local VFW post, her throat tight. She never saw the kid again. The man from Ethel Red Development Group introduced himself as Thorne. His suit was flawless. He sat in one of her booths, refusing coffee, his briefcase resting on the vinyl seat like a king on a throne. "Mrs. Gable," he began, his smile a sterile thing. "Our offer is 20% above market value. It's a windfall." Martha wiped down the counter. "This diner isn't for sale." He sighed with theatrical patience. "With all due respect, that's no longer your decision. The City Council has rezoned this parcel under the Urban Redevelopment Act. Your property has been designated as part of a necessary acquisition to prevent urban blight." The word stung. Blight. She looked around at the clean floors, the polished chrome, the framed photos of Frank in his uniform. This place was the opposite of blight. It was life. "There's nothing blighted about this place," she said, her voice low. "The legislation is not concerned with sentiment," Thorne said, sliding a thick stack of documents across the table. "This is the court order. We have the city's backing. We take possession in 48 hours. The offer is goodwill. If you force this to condemnation court, the lawyers will eat up most of it. Take the money. It's the smart play." He made it sound so simple. A transaction. But he was talking about dismantling her heart and selling it for scrap. That evening, she called Charlie Pike, a local lawyer who'd been practicing for 40 years. His voice was heavy. "Martha, it's a damn shame, but it's legal," he said. "This Ethelred outfit is slick. They greased palms at City Hall, got their ordinance passed. It's a loophole big enough to drive a bulldozer through. We can fight, but they'll bury us in motions. It'll cost you everything, and they'll probably still win." Hopelessness was a cold, physical weight. After she hung up, she sat alone in the dark diner, the familiar shapes of the booths like ghosts. She thought about giving up, taking the money, disappearing. Her hand drifted to the old rotary phone. She dialed a number she hadn't called in years. It belonged to Gus, a retired trucker who used to lead a local riding club before moving down to the Ozarks. She just needed to tell someone who would understand. She didn't ask for help. She wouldn't have known how. She just told him the story, her voice flat with defeat. She told him about the letter, the lawyer, and the word blight. Gus listened, his silence a comfort over the crackling phone line. "That ain't right, Martha," he rumbled when she was finished. "That just ain't right at all." She thanked him and hung up. She locked the door one last time, feeling smaller and more alone than she ever had. She was scheduled to hand over the keys in the morning. She woke before her alarm, the sky a bruised purple. Sleep had offered no escape. She dressed in the dark, her movements mechanical. She would go to the diner. She would meet Thorne. She would sign the papers. She would do it with dignity. That was all she had left. The drive was quiet. As she took the exit, she noticed something odd. A low, rhythmic thrumming in the air, a sound so deep it was a feeling in her sternum. It grew louder as she got closer. She turned the final corner, and her foot hit the brake. The entire street in front of the crossroads was lined with them. Motorcycles, not a few, not a dozen. They were parked in a perfect, disciplined line, stretching from the stop sign down past the diner and around the bend. Harleys mostly. Big touring bikes and sleek Dynas. Their chrome fenders and handlebars caught the first frail rays of the sun, scattering the light like shattered diamonds. There must have been close to 100 of them. Standing beside the bikes were their riders, men and women in leather and denim. They weren't making a scene. They were just there, standing quietly, arms crossed, watching the sun come up. A silent, formidable army. Martha slowly pulled her car into her usual spot, her mind struggling to process it. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She got out of the car, her keys jingling. A few of the bikers turned and nodded at her, respectful nods. She was fumbling with the back door lock when a sleek black Mercedes sedan pulled into the front lot. Mr. Thorne. He got out, smoothing his tie, his face a mask of corporate authority. He took 2 steps toward the front door, then stopped. His eyes scanned the line of motorcycles. He followed the line down the street and back again. He looked at the men standing there, their vests bearing the patches of a dozen different clubs and veteran groups from 3 states. His confident stride faltered. The color drained from his face. He stood frozen for a long moment, then slowly backed away, pulling out his phone. He got back into his car, made a frantic call, and without another glance at the diner, he sped away. He did not return. The back door finally clicked open, and Martha stepped into the familiar quiet of her kitchen. She leaned against the counter, her legs weak. A few minutes later, there was a soft knock on the back door. She opened it to find a man standing there. He was older now, his beard thick and shot through with gray. But she knew the eyes. They were the same ancient eyes she'd seen in the face of a 22-year-old kid on a cold November day. He was bigger, the worn leather vest fitting his shoulders like armor. He held his helmet in his hands. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a deep baritone. "Name's Jake. Gus called me. Said you might have a problem with a developer." Martha stared at him, her mind connecting the dots with a disorienting lurch. The kid, the burger, the $5 bill. I don't understand," she whispered. Jake gestured with his head toward the street. "There are 97 of us out there. We just came for breakfast. Heard the coffee was good on Veterans Day." He gave her a small, wry smile. Figured it was probably good today, too. The simplicity of it was overwhelming. Tears pricked at her eyes. For 21 years, she had offered a simple kindness, a hot meal given without expectation. She'd done it because it was the right thing to do, a small nod to the men and women who, like Frank, had signed a blank check. She never thought of it as a transaction. She never kept a tally. But they had. They had remembered. Every free cup of coffee, every hot plate of food, every time she treated them with quiet dignity, when the world saw only a stereotype. It had all been logged in a ledger she didn't know existed. "Some of us," Jake said, his voice dropping, becoming more serious. He looked her straight in the eye. "We don't forget a hot meal on a cold day, ma'am. Ever." That was it. That was all he needed to say. The disproportionate, beautiful, terrifying grace of their return was all there in that one sentence. A single meal, repaid with a cavalry. "We'll be around for a few days," he continued, his tone matter-of-fact again. "Just making sure the city's zoning issue gets cleared up. Sometimes these things are just a misunderstanding." The message was clear. No developer, no city council would push a bulldozer through a wall of 97 veterans on motorcycles to get to her diner. It wasn't a threat of violence. It was a statement of presence. It was the power of a community showing up. Martha finally found her voice. "Well," she said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand and pulling her apron tight. "You and your friends can't just stand out there. The coffee's on." She turned and walked back to the coffee station, her hands moving with purpose for the first time in days. The dip in the linoleum felt like a friendly welcome. Outside, the sun was fully up, glinting off a long, silent line of steel and grace. The rumble of the engines was the sound of a promise kept.